Hi, this is Alyssa Gregory with Maine Forest Service. For this lesson of the Invasive Plant Academy, we will cover writing an invasive plant control practice plan. At this time, I'd ask you to visit the Maine Forest Service Invasive Plant Management Program webpage. We're going to be referencing example plans, the program manual, and the specification and checklist from that website. As part of the invasive plant control practice plans, there are required components and cost share documents. The first component being the written plan, and we'll cover in detail some of the sections and what needs to be included. We also require several maps, digital information, including data entered into IMAP invasives, and property boundary data sent to Greg Miller at the Maine Forest Service. For the cost share paperwork, we require an affidavit and some sort of proof of payment that could include a canceled check or bank record. We'll go into that a little bit later. And then also the claim for payment document. All of these cost share documents can be found on the Maine Forest Service webpage for the Invasive Plant Management Program. So what's required for an IPCPP? Before a plan is started or turned in for completion, you should have an approval letter on hand. Not all plans may be approved, so it's essential that you have that approval letter. For everything that we discussed today, it's covered in the program manual that's found on the IPMP webpage. You can also see the invasive plant control practice plan specifications and checklist. That checklist that you can see there on the right is what our Maine Forest Service district foresters use when reviewing plans for completion. All of this information can be found under the foresters and other natural resource professionals. That includes the program manual and the checklist. Here you can see the plan components, including a property overview, survey description and summary of survey efforts, survey table, description of invasive plants found, that should be qualitative, a table of invasive plants found, explanation of prioritization strategy, prioritize management recommendations, and a 5-year management timeline. You can also choose to include with your plan an invasive plants to watch out for. This could include plants that are invasive in the United States or New England, but not quite in Maine, or plants that are found in neighboring counties. You can also choose to include images in your report. Let's take a deeper look into each one of these sections to see what's required. In the property overview, you should provide a basic description of the property, its location, and also the general topography. You should also include basic types of land cover. If there's a house on the property, that should be noted. Ponds, agricultural fields, wetlands, forest. You can choose to break down forests into cover type, and also any special habitats worthy of mention that could be relevant to the contents of the plan. If you note that there are endangered species in certain areas or areas that the landowner does not want to be treated, please include those in the property description as well. In this overview, you should also include size of eligible acres and the total property size. If the landowner is not choosing to include all of their property, it should be a different acreage listed. So if just the forested land is included and the total property is 80 acres and only 70 is forested, we're only going to put 70 for surveyed acres. The landowner's current uses and goals should also be included in this section. If they currently have a management or stewardship plan or a woodland resource action plan, it would be a good idea to include the goals from that plan in this property overview as well. This is also a good place to include any other relevant property information, such as points of access, road conditions, gated areas, anything that can be useful for the landowner or whoever does the treatments. In the text of this section, please reference maps included with the plan that show the property boundaries and the acres that are surveyed. Moving on to survey description and summary of survey efforts. In this area, you're going to list the dates the field survey was conducted. It could be 1 day, several days, however long it took you to complete the survey. Also, total hours spent surveying. Please reference the table below. This is found in the program manual and on the website as well. It shows acres and the minimum hours associated with those acres and level of infestation. So if you have 50 acres and a low infestation, spending somewhere between 2 to 4 hours would be reasonable. You're also going to describe what parts of the property were surveyed for invasive plants, and you're going to reference the map that shows the survey route or your track that was taken through the property. It could be as simple as, please see map A, map 1, for a loop of property track trail. If there was only an infestation in the northwest corner, you can reference that in this area. Description of invasive plants found and the table of invasive plants found. So in this section, you're going to describe qualitatively which invasive plants were found and where they were found on the property, highlighting any key findings. There's great examples on the invasive plant management webpage. I included one here for Asiatic bittersweet. It includes the tendency of the vines. You could also include what they look like, and then references the map where it depicts the bittersweet being found. This section could also summarize acres infested and number of records for the key species. You could also note any plants not yet widespread in Maine and explain the importance of containing and managing these. Like we said before, it could be something that's found in New England, not yet here in Maine, that's invasive, but something to be on the lookout for. In this section, you're also going to include a table of the invasive plants found. I included the example below here for Asiatic bittersweet. It has the common and scientific name, the growth form, the level of infestation, and then where it was found on the property. The next section of your plan can explain explanation of prioritization strategies. So once again, you're going to explain in words what approach you took to prioritizing management of invasive plants on the site. If there were circumstances that caused you to recommend something different than usual, explain that. So one example here is if a certain stand was going to be harvested, say in 2026, you may prioritize that stand over another. So just making note of what prioritization strategy you have. Following up with the prioritization strategy is the recommendations. So list the prioritized management recommendations with numbers. So 1 being the item you would recommend doing first, 2, etc. Include language about prevention in this section. Below, you'll see an example from a practice plan that's on our website. The example being, be proactive before you harvest timber. So the goal would be to minimize post-harvest invasive plant species invasions. The example being, in the late spring before the planned harvest area should be surveyed for the presence of invasive species. Any invasive plant species found, especially larger individuals, should be treated either by mechanical methods, chemical methods, or a combination. This will decrease the potential spread of invasive plant species after the disturbance of harvest operations. Next will be your timeline. This is your timeline for management. You can see here it's done in table form. This is the preferred format. So we can see here the year, the task, the timeline of year, and the responsible party. For the responsible party, it could be the landowner, contractor, licensed applicator, or some other group of individuals. Time of year is especially important when using herbicide or mechanical treatment, so noting what time of year that should be done is essential. Moving on to maps, we have a list of required maps. It's also included in the program manual and the checklist. We need the property boundary and some sort of spatial information sent to Greg Miller with the property boundary. There's examples of what is accepted for the property boundary on our program manual and website. The next map is surveyed acres. Your surveyed acres section should reference this map as well as the surveyed route. There should be an overall map of all invasive plant species and then individual maps for each of the invasive plant species that are found on the property. Here's an example of a property boundary map that was done on Google Earth. You can see a very simple map. It just needs to show where the boundary of the property is. The next map here shows surveyed acres. So the track that the individual used when surveying. And this is the map that'll be referenced during the surveyed section. Map 3 here is all infestations. You can see here a good portion of the property has invasive plants. And there's also, with the polygons that are showing those high infestations, you can see little dots there where we found smaller infestations. And then you move on to individual species. So this map here was done on IMAP invasives, and it's showing shrubby honeysuckle occurrence on the property. Here's an example using smaller spaces here to show a smaller infestation of Japanese knotweed. So with the maps, we do require spatial information as well. So invasive plants should be mapped using IMAP invasives and entered into that program. There is an option if you prefer to use Avenza to do Avenza and send a bulk upload to our program coordinators so that they can enter it into IMAP Invasive, but it needs to be in IMAP. We also need to send property boundary data, as I mentioned before, to Greg Miller at Maine Forest Service. If you look at the specifications checklist on page 4, it explains that. It's very important that both of these steps be done. And if you have questions on using IMAP or ways to export shape files or any other, however format you're trying to send it, please reach out to Maine Forest Service. We can help you with that. At this time, we'll take a brief break. Feel free to hit pause. When we return, we'll discuss the documents associated with the invasive plant control practice plans, and then how to use the plan to later apply for treatment. Now that we've covered the invasive plant control practice plans, the maps, and the spatial data, we're going to move on to cost share documents. As part of the cost share, there are several documents that needed to be included. The first being the affidavit, so the invasive plant control practice plan landowner forester affidavit. In that section, there is a portion where the landowner will write their name, the plan preparer, date, surveyed acres, an estimation of where the property is located, that tax map and lot number, and what town, the amount that they paid for the plan, and then some sort of proof of payment with their signature. I put here a check front and back, and you'll see on the affidavit there's a place to write the check number. There's a space at the bottom of that affidavit for the plan preparer to write their information and the amount as well as with their signature. You can see on that form that it asks for a copy of the canceled check or a similar written record generated by the bank, just showing that there was some sort of transfer of funds for the plan. This should be included when you turn in your plan. Along with the canceled check and the affidavit, you should also include a copy of your invoice that was submitted to the landowner marked paid. The amount that's listed on the invoice should match that on the claim for payment. The next form is the claim for payment. The top portion is what the landowner and the plan preparer will fill out. The bottom portion is what Maine Forest Service district foresters fill out when they're reviewing the practice plans. You'll see that there's a place for the landowner to write their name and their address. It's really important that that name and address match what was filled out on the initial application. So that new vendor form that was filled out when the landowner applied, the name and address need to be consistent. You'll see at the bottom, the district forester reviews if the plan meets standards, that all documentation is in place. We do check that the GIS information has been verified by Greg Miller, and then verifying that those acres are consistent with the plan. So all of this needs to be submitted before anything can be turned in for cost share and reimbursement. So what happens when you complete the plan? You'll deliver the plan, the map, and that cost share paperwork with the invoice to the landowner. Your landowner will fill out their portion of the paperwork, pay you, and return the plans, maps, and spatial data. You'll then share those documents with Maine Forest Service and send the spatial data to Greg Miller. All of the plans, maps, and cost share paperwork need to go to the invasive plant inbox. Maine Forest Service invasive plant grants.dacf@maine.gov. The title of the email needs to be IPCPP and the landowner's name. So example, if Mr. and Mrs. Smith apply for an invasive plant control practice plan, the title of the email would be Invasive Plant Control Practice Plan Smith. Once the plan, maps, and cost share is sent to the district forester and spatial data sent to Greg Miller, the district forester will review the plan maps, verify that the spatial data is consistent with the plan, and that everything is filled out with the cost share paperwork. At that point, it will be submitted to our program coordinator for review into our database, and then funds can be dispersed. At this time, if the window is open, the landowner can choose to submit the application for treatment, but this needs to be done once the plan is approved. Incomplete or partial plans will not be reviewed. If we don't have spatial data, if we don't have the cost share paperwork, if we're missing maps, they will not be reviewed by the district forester. So everything needs to be turned in before that step is taken. So what's next? If they have their plan, they're happy with it, everything's signed in, turned in, the landowner's paid, They can choose then to apply for treatment using their invasive plant control practice plan. For this portion, woodland owners will consult their plan for the treatment recommendations offered by you, the plan preparer. The landowner should then contact contractors who offer invasive plant treatment services. It's going to be the services or treatments that are recommended in that plan. In some instances, it may be mechanical and herbicide or a combination of both, so you may have to utilize, or they may have to utilize multiple contractors. If they decide to take that step, landowners will complete, sign, and submit a Maine Forest Service plant control treatment application form. It'll be sent to Maine Forest Service. That application can be found on the Maine Forest Service invasive plant management website as well. Once again, wait for the approval letter. So if the plan is approved, an approval letter will be sent out. Really important that contractors not start treatment before they receive that award letter. If you have any questions about the invasive plant management program or writing practice plans, please reach out to either MNAP or Maine Forest Service. Everyone has a district forester. You can see the district forester map on our webpage. There is a search feature where you can search the town to see who your local district forester is and contact them with questions. Or you can reach out to Jan Santerre, Nicole Rogers, or Chad Hammer with Maine Natural Areas Program. Thank you for participating in the Invasive Plant Academy. Like I said, if you have any questions, please reach out. We're always happy to help.